Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the Richard Curtis-a-thon, where we watch all of Richard Curtis's stories in order, and then we get excited about who Hugh Grant is going to regenerate into this week. It's a very exciting time. Now, of all the stories we have watched in the Whoathon, I think this is the story that has most keenly tested something that I've said multiple times, which is that Doctor Who can tell any kind of story imaginable. And it's one of the reasons I love Doctor Who. Because what Doctor Who's here is telling a completely different person's story, both a different writer and a different character. Because this could be an episode from Vincent van Gogh, The Life of. And it is... I cannot think, apart from our main writers, our showrunners of the last few years, who have been Doctor Who fans, dyed-in-the-wool Doctor Who fans, I can't think of an instance where a non-Doctor Who fan, I say that in italics, so I don't really know, although I have my theories, has written for the show, and it's been so clearly them. So Richard Curtis is... We were discussing it earlier, were we not, my darling? And we came up with the pithy breakdown that 4 weddings and a funeral is class, and everything else is a little bit. I've seen Love Actually, and I can barely remember Notting Hill, and we saw that thing on Netflix that was Richard Curtis affiliated. Anyway, the point is, Richard Curtis I wouldn't call him an auteur, because that would perhaps be stretching the word, but he's certainly somebody with a style and a genre of his own, and the guy's insanely popular. And so you have to assume that Moffat's not rewritten much of this. In the same way that Davis didn't rewrite Moffat, there's even more of a case that Moffat would not have rewritten Curtis. So I think we get pure Curtis here, for the most part, with some tinkering. So there are various reasons why this feels very unlike a Doctor Who story, okay? It's structured, it's set up in such a way that I think people who aren't Doctor Who fans think that Doctor Who stories work. There is only one other example. I've been racking my brains for the last couple of hours. I can think of only one other example of this idea that must happen in other sci-fi shows, time travel shows, where you rock up and you see something that you think you know what it's going to be, and it's not quite right, so you go back in time to check it out. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but the only time I can think that Doctor Who has ever done that before is weirdly, but a few episodes ago in The Time of Angels, where it's all wrapped up into a big joke and it's underplayed completely just so we can say hello sweetie and see River Song. It's the only, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's the only time I can think where a story has been, the impetus for the story has started like that. So I think that's what non-Doctor Who fans think that Doctor Who stories are like. Now that's fine. It's a minor point. But it just strikes me as a bit odd that that's what comes out from Richard Curtis' pen. It's not a bad thing necessarily. Another thing that's not a bad thing. Doctor Who doesn't do sensitivity like this. This is a good thing. I mean, we've never really been afforded the opportunity to actually talk and think about depression and mental illness more widely than we do in this story. And it is foregrounded to an extent that it is, there's no avoiding it, it is front and centre. Richard Curtis's stuff is very front and centre, and that's fine. And in this context, what you get is a truly, heartbreaking is too big a word, I think. And the reason I think it's too big a word, I mean, the story of Vincent van Gogh is heartbreaking. Well, I think it's actually just very real. And I think heartbreaking does it a disjustice because people live with depression every single day, and people live with being accused, sorry to use that word, but in the times of madness and all that kind of thing. And we watched it, and the moment that resonated with me, and this is testament to Matt Smith, you know, transitioning into a Richard Curtis story as opposed to a Doctor Who story, is where, what did he say to Van Gogh?
Can I help?
Can I help? And I think Matt Smith does a stand-up job. So does Tony Curran. My gosh, what a performance as Vincent van Gogh, as everybody's favourite Scottish Vincent van Gogh.
I'm a bit confused about the accent.
Well, I mean, they play with that idea all the time, but what they got is an actor with the chops to play this role, and it's beautifully portrayed, and it is fantastic. I think that the balance of Vincent and the Doctor what an aptly named title. And is it a play? Is it a pun? Because he is a doctor and the doctor. You see, this is another Richard Curtis thing. I'm not saying Richard Curtis is all surface level. That's not what I'm saying. But it's very clear. Anyway, the balance of Vincent and the Doctor is really unlike any other story we've had before. We've had many an occasion where we've had a massive historical figure. We had Churchill not long ago, for crying out loud.
He was rubbish, though.
Well, in comparison to this, he certainly was. He wasn't rubbish, that's unfair. But in comparison to this, he certainly was nowhere near. We have had massive actors in Doctor Who before. In terms of your British viewership, Brian Blessed was in Doctor Who. And he, but it still felt very Doctor Who. This is the most un-Doctor Who I think Doctor Who has ever felt. Which is not to say that it's not absolutely magnificent and a borderline masterpiece. I mean, this is not a Doctor Who story, it's a Vincent van Gogh story. And that is fine because, and heart on my sleeve, I love Vincent van Gogh stuff. I've been to the Vincent van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. I've seen his work close up. And just as this programme tries to get across the sort of power and the resonance and the universality, is that a word?
Universality.
That'll do. Of his stuff, that's what you get when you see it. I mean, there we go. It's just incredible. So it is a thing of beauty, this story. And it's one of the stories that only recently a colleague of mine at work, my lovely friend Tim, who's an adorable, brilliant man, I can't remember how it cropped up in conversation, but I said you should go and watch the Doctor Who story called Vincent and the Doctor. And blow me, and this is the sort of guy he is, he went and watched it, came in and told me he cried at it. And well, he said it, I had a tear in my eye, to be fair. But my point is, it's the sort of story that you proffer to people who might not be Doctor Who fans, who are interested in Vincent van Gogh, or who would like to taste what Doctor Who is like. And this is a gateway story, isn't it? Because it's written by Richard bloody Curtis, of all people. And
Shout out to Bill Nighy, please.
Oh, well, yes. And it's very strange to see Bill Nighy in this because, did you know this, Lib? There were two people who were up for the role of the Ninth Doctor, and they were Christopher Eccleston and Bill Nighy, and Eccleston got the nod. How things could have been different. But
if you'd have had Bill Nighy there, you wouldn't have had Tennant following that.
I think that's very...
You certainly wouldn't have had Matt Smith.
Yeah, I think that's a very
So
good
I'm
call.
quite glad it worked out that way.
But it's odd to see Bill Nighy in this because he has a minor role, but it's Bill Nighy. I mean, this is it. Again, I always say this, as a British person, Bill Nighy has he's just a bit of a legend, quite frankly, and a hero. I don't know if that transcends this country, but seeing him in that role with the bow tie, some lovely moments there. Bow ties are cool. And him summing up Van Gogh at the end, again, an actor of that quality. And let's be honest, he's only in this episode because it's a Curtis episode, because they have that connection. So listen, this is a masterpiece, really. I'm not messing about. But it's not the greatest Doctor Who story of all time, because I would question whether it's truly a Doctor Who story. And that's not to undermine it. It's a beautiful thing to engage with, and it's absolutely fantastic. The only thing I would say, and I've been pondering this a little bit, I'm loving Matt Smith's first season. I think maybe I'm loving it more than anybody else in the house, with the possible exception of Winnie, actually, because she's a bit of a sucker for Matt Smith. But it's very uneven.
I don't like Amy Pond very much. Though.
Oh, why? Why do you not like Amy Pond? She doesn't even remember she's lost the love of her life. Cut her some slack.
I mean, I'm not going to fight you about it. I just don't think the Carrigan is all that.
Oh, I think that's...
Well, I want to.
I think she's lovely. And the relationship between the Doctor and Amy has taken on a new piquancy. I don't know if that's the right word. But there's a new level to that now, and it's absolutely lovely. Yeah. This is a peculiar first season. We'll reflect back on that. But this story almost stands alone. This almost should have been a special, you know what I mean? This could have been... they could have done... It would have been interesting.
Like a New Year special.
It could have been.
It's a little bit solemn.
I think they've done solemn Christmas episodes, solemn New Year's episodes. It's interesting that Doctor Who's never gone down that path of really nailing down on these historical stories. You know how I feel about historical stories. You obviously have to have the alien in this, but it's so inconsequential for what this is trying to do. There's a good 10, 12 minutes at the end of that resolution of that story to actually wrap up the real story, which is the Vincent van Gogh stuff, which is tragic and beautiful and heartfelt and a testament to a genius. Again, though, compare this to the Shakespeare one. We met flipping Shakespeare and it was treated like a bit of a jape. Isn't that interesting? A completely different tone. Anyway, there we go. I'm only meant to make this a short one and I've already spoken for nearly 11 minutes. Say la vie. Farewell.